I saved for 2 years to put together $8,500 for my dream wedding venue deposit. I gave the money to my father to hold because he insisted it would be safer with him. 3 weeks before my wedding, I called the venue to confirm final details. They told me no deposit had ever been made. When I confronted my father, he didn't even look sorry. He said he gave the money to my sister Emily for her divorce celebration party. A divorce party, funded with my wedding deposit. When I asked how he could possibly justify that, he looked me dead in the eye and said your sister needed to heal after her divorce, and you can always get married at the courthouse. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I did something he never saw coming. Before I tell you exactly what I did with that information and how it unraveled everything my father thought he knew about me, I need you to understand something. This wasn't the first time. My name is Sarah, and by the time my father handed my wedding deposit to Emily for her divorce party, the script had been running for 28 years. One daughter got safety nets, bailouts, and endless second chances. The other daughter got told she was strong enough to handle it on her own. Emily had always been the one who needed more. More money, more attention, more forgiveness for choices that would have got me cut off without a second thought. But what my father didn't account for was this. The independent daughter had been keeping receipts, and I was about to cash them all in. Growing up, the math was never complicated. Emily got a car for her 16th birthday. I got a lecture about public transportation building character. Emily's college tuition was paid in full by our parents. Mine came with a stack of loan paperwork and a speech about the value of hard work. When Emily dropped out halfway through her second year because she, quote, wasn't feeling it, my father hugged her and said they'd figure it out together. When I asked for help buying textbooks my junior year, he reminded me that I'd always been resourceful. The pattern was so consistent it became invisible. Not to me, to everyone else. My mother would smile and say, "We love you girls the same. We just parent differently based on your strengths." Emily's strength, apparently, was needing things. My strength was not asking. By the time I turned 25, I'd learned to operate in a parallel universe. I had a job I'd earned on my own, an apartment I paid for without co-signers, a life built from decisions no one in my family had approved or even noticed. Emily, meanwhile, still lived at home, rent-free, bill-free, consequence-free. Then she got married. The wedding cost $42,000. My parents paid for $38,000 of it. The venue, the dress, the flowers, the open bar, the destination bachelorette party in Mexico. I was a bridesmaid. I paid for my own dress, my own travel, my own hotel room. When I arrived at the venue the day of the wedding, my father pulled me aside and told me how proud he was of Emily for finding love. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't ask if I was seeing anyone. He handed me a glass of champagne and told me to make sure I got good photos for the family album. The marriage lasted 3 years. Emily called it toxic. She said her husband didn't appreciate her, that he worked too much, that she felt unsupported. She moved back home 2 weeks after she filed for divorce. My parents set up the guest room like she'd never left. My mother cooked her favorite meals. My father paid her legal fees without hesitation. I watched all of this from my apartment across town, where I was working 50-hour weeks and saving every spare dollar I could. Because 6 months earlier, I'd gotten engaged. His name was Daniel. We'd been together for 4 years. He was kind, steady, supportive in ways I didn't know I needed until I had them. He proposed on a quiet Saturday morning in our kitchen. No grand gesture, just a ring and a question and a future I actually wanted. When I told my parents, my mother hugged me and said, "That's wonderful, honey." My father shook Daniel's hand and said congratulations. Then they went back to talking about Emily's divorce. I didn't expect them to pay for my wedding. I'd stopped expecting things from them a long time ago. But I wanted one thing, a venue that felt like the beginning of something beautiful, a place where the people I loved could gather and celebrate a relationship I'd built without anyone's help. I found it 8 months before the wedding date, a garden estate with string lights and old oak trees and a stone terrace that looked like something out of a dream. The deposit was $8,500. I saved for 2 years to get that number in my account. Extra shifts, freelance work on weekends, skipping vacations, skipping dinners out, skipping everything that wasn't essential. I watched the number grow dollar by dollar until I finally had enough. I was going to pay it myself. I was ready to. Then my father offered to hold it. We were at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I mentioned I was about to put down the deposit. My father set down his fork and said, if you want, you can give me the money and I'll handle the payment. It'll be safer than carrying a check around. I can wire it directly to the venue. I hesitated. Daniel looked at me across the table, his expression carefully neutral. He knew the history. He'd watched me navigate years of being the afterthought daughter. But my father was smiling. My mother was nodding. And some small, stubborn part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just this once, I could trust them with something that mattered. So I said okay. I transferred the money to his account the next day. All $8,500. 2 years of work, condensed into a single transaction. He texted me a thumbs-up emoji and said consider it done. 3 weeks passed. Emily's divorce was finalized. I saw the post on social media before I heard it from anyone in the family. She was standing in front of the courthouse, holding her final decree, captioned "Finally Free." The comments were full of celebration. My mother wrote, "So proud of you, sweetheart." My father wrote, "New beginnings." I sent a polite text, "Congratulations. I hope you find what you're looking for." She didn't reply. 2 days later, I called the venue to confirm some final details about the ceremony timeline. The coordinator picked up on the second ring, cheerful and efficient. She pulled up my file. Then her tone changed. She said, "I don't see a deposit on record for your date." I felt my stomach drop. I told her that wasn't possible. My father had wired the payment 3 weeks ago. She put me on hold, checked again, came back and said, "I'm sorry, but we haven't received anything. Your date is still listed as tentative. If we don't receive the deposit by the end of the week, we'll have to release it to another couple." I thanked her, hung up, sat in my car outside my office building, staring at my phone. Then I called my father. He picked up on the fourth ring. His voice had that distracted quality it always had when I called. "Hey, honey, what's up? I'm in the middle of something." I said the venue, never received the deposit. There was a pause, not the pause of someone confused, the pause of someone caught. He said, "Oh, right, I was going to talk to you about that." My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Talk to me about what? He sighed, the kind of sigh that meant he was about to say something he'd already decided was justified. "Sarah, your sister was really struggling after the divorce. She needed something to lift her spirits, so I gave her the money for a celebration." I said, "What kind of celebration?" "A party," he said, "a divorce party. To help her heal and move forward, it was important." $8,500, I said slowly. "You gave Emily my wedding deposit to throw herself a party." He didn't deny it. He said she needed it more than you need a fancy venue. "You and Daniel can get married at the courthouse. It's about the marriage, not the wedding. You've always been practical. You'll understand." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my father explain why my sister's party was more important than my wedding. And that's when I realized something that changed everything. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was expecting me to agree. I didn't hang up. I didn't yell. I asked one question. "How much did the party cost?" He hesitated. Then he said, "I don't know exactly. Your sister handled the planning, but it was important for her mental health. She needed closure." I said the number, "Dad, how much of my $8,500 is left?" Another pause. Then quietly, "There's nothing left." Nothing left. Emily had spent $8,500 on a single party, a divorce party, while I was 3 weeks away from losing my wedding venue because the deposit I'd saved for 2 years had been redirected to fund my sister's celebration of her failed marriage. I said, "I need that money back, today." My father's tone shifted, defensive now. "Sarah, you're being unreasonable. What's done is done. Your sister needed support during a difficult time. You'll figure something out. You always do." "You always do." 4 words that summarized 28 years of being the capable one, the independent one, the one who didn't get help because she didn't need it. I hung up. Daniel came home an hour later and found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. He took one look at my face and said what happened. I told him every word, the missing deposit, Emily's party, my father's justification, the expectation that I would just accept it and move on. Daniel didn't interrupt. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We'll pay the deposit again. Together. We'll figure it out." And that's when I started crying. Not because of the money, because Daniel's first instinct was to solve the problem, to protect what we were building, while my own father's first instinct had been to sacrifice it for my sister. But here's the thing. I didn't want to just pay the deposit again and pretend this hadn't happened. I didn't want to quietly absorb the loss and let my family continue the same pattern they'd been running my entire life. I wanted them to face what they'd done. So I started gathering information. First, I checked my bank records. The transfer to my father's account was right there. $8,500, sent 3 weeks and 2 days ago. I took screenshots, saved them to 3 different places. Then I called my cousin Jessica. She'd been invited to Emily's divorce party. I hadn't been. Jessica picked up on the first ring, and I asked her one simple question. What was the party like? She laughed. Oh my God, Sarah, it was insane. Your parents went all out. They rented this whole event space downtown, had it catered, open bar, a DJ, custom decorations. Emily had a cake shaped like broken wedding rings. There were party favors, little bags that said free at last with mini champagne bottles inside. It was like a wedding reception, but for a divorce. How many people were there, I asked. Maybe 70, she said. It was huge. Your dad gave this whole speech about new beginnings. Your mom was crying happy tears. Emily was in this white dress, like she was getting married to herself or something. It was a whole production. I thanked Jessica and hung up. 70 people, catered food, open bar, a DJ, custom cake and party favors. My father had taken my wedding deposit and funded a spectacle. I sat with that for a while. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through old family photos, not the nice ones in frames, the ones buried in boxes in my closet. Birthday parties where Emily got elaborate cakes and I got store-bought cupcakes. Christmas mornings where the pile of presents under the tree was visibly uneven. Graduation photos where my parents showed up for Emily's high school ceremony with flowers and balloons, and showed up to my college graduation empty-handed because they'd forgotten it was that weekend. I wasn't imagining it. The evidence was everywhere. I just spent so long being told I was practical and independent that I'd stopped questioning why those words were only ever applied to justify giving me less. Daniel found me on the floor surrounded by photographs. He sat down next to me and said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "I'm thinking I'm done." Done with what he asked. Done being the understanding one, I said. Done absorbing their choices and calling it maturity. Done watching them fund Emily's chaos while I pay for my own stability. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I didn't know yet, but I knew it had to be something they couldn't ignore. The next morning, I called the venue, explained the situation. The coordinator was sympathetic but firm. They needed the deposit by end of week or they'd have to release the date. She said, "I'm so sorry, but we have 3 other couples interested in that Saturday." I asked if I could have 48 more hours. She said she'd check with management. Then I started making a list. Every dollar my parents had ever given Emily. Every payment, every bailout, every expense covered. I went back through years of overheard conversations, casual mentions at family dinners, my mother's comments about helping your sister through a rough patch. I called my Aunt Linda, my father's sister, who'd always been the family record keeper. I asked her casually about family finances, about who got help when. Linda was honest in a way my parents never were. She said, "Your father has always had a soft spot for Emily. I think he sees her as fragile. You were always so capable, Sarah. I think they just assumed you didn't need the same support." I asked her if she knew about the divorce party. She went quiet. Then she said I heard about it. I thought it was excessive, but it wasn't my place to say anything. Do you know what it cost? I asked. She hesitated. Then she said your mother mentioned they covered about $9,000 total. 9,000. My father had told me there was nothing left of my 8,500, which meant he'd added 500 of his own money to make sure Emily's party was everything she wanted. I thanked Linda and added that number to my list. Over the next 2 days, I built a spreadsheet. Every instance I could verify or reasonably estimate. Emily's car, $16,000, her college tuition before she dropped out, $43,000, her wedding, $38,000, her legal fees for the divorce, estimated $6,000, the divorce party, $9,000. Rent and utilities covered while she lived at home as an adult. Conservatively, another $30,000 over 5 years. The total came to $142,000. Things I'd received from my parents in the same time frame. Birthday gifts averaging maybe $200 a year. A $500 contribution to my college fund one time. Total, less than $8,000 over 28 years. The gap was $134,000. I showed Daniel the spreadsheet. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "This is going to blow up your family." "I know," I said. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. I thought about that question, thought about what doing this meant. It meant confrontation. It meant probably losing whatever relationship I had left with my parents. It meant Emily would hate me. It meant family gatherings would become impossible. But I also thought about what not doing this meant. It meant paying for my venue deposit twice. It meant watching my father walk me down the aisle knowing he'd chosen my sister over me again. It meant spending the rest of my life being the reasonable daughter who absorbed every slight because she was strong enough to handle it. I looked at Daniel and said, "I'm sure." That night, I wrote an email, not to my parents, to my entire extended family. I kept it factual, no emotional language, just numbers and dates. I explained that my wedding deposit had been given to Emily without my knowledge or consent. I attached the bank transfer showing I'd sent the money to my father. I included a screenshot of the venue's message confirming no deposit had been received. I added Jessica's confirmation about the party and Linda's information about the total cost. Then I included the spreadsheet, every dollar, every instance, 28 years of financial disparity laid out in rows and columns. I ended with one paragraph. I'm not writing this to shame anyone or to ask for money. I'm writing this because I'm done pretending this pattern doesn't exist. I'm done being told I'm independent when what that really means is I'm worth less investment. I'm done watching my sister receive endless support for choices that hurt her while I'm expected to fund my own life milestones alone. This isn't about one party or one deposit. This is about a family that decided a long time ago which daughter mattered more, and I'm no longer willing to smile and accept that decision. I didn't include my parents in the recipient list, but I knew someone would forward it to them within an hour. I asked Daniel one more time, "Are you okay with this?" He said, "I'm okay with anything that means you stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry." I hit send at 9:43 on a Thursday night. By 10:15, my phone started ringing. The first call was from my Aunt Linda. I answered. She said, "I just read your email. Sarah, I had no idea it was this bad." More calls came in. My Uncle Marco, my cousin Rachel, my grandmother, some were supportive, some were shocked, some just wanted to know if the numbers were real. I confirmed they were real. I had documentation for everything. Then my mother called. I let it ring through to voicemail. 2 minutes later, another call from my mother, then my father, then Emily. I turned my phone on silent and watched the screen light up over and over with their names. Daniel said, "Do you want to hear what they have to say?" I said not yet. At 11:02, my mother left a voicemail. I played it on speaker. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Sarah, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing with this email, but you've humiliated your father and me in front of the entire family. You've made your sister sound like a burden when all we've ever done is love both of you equally. We gave Emily more financial support because she needed it, not because we love her more. You were always so independent. We thought you wanted it that way. Call me back so we can discuss this privately like adults." I deleted it. My father's voicemail came next. His tone was colder. "Sarah, this is inappropriate and frankly shocking. You're weaponizing private family matters and twisting them into some kind of scoreboard. Your mother is in tears. Emily is devastated. I don't know what you want from us, but airing our private business to the entire family is not the way to handle this. You owe us an apology." I owed them an apology. Emily's voicemail was the one that surprised me, not because of what she said, because of how she said it. Her voice wasn't angry, it was performative, wounded. "Sarah, I can't believe you would do this. I've been going through the hardest time of my life, and instead of supporting me, you're trying to make me look like some kind of villain. Mom and Dad helped me because I was struggling. I didn't ask them to use your money. I didn't even know that's where it came from until tonight. You're making me sound like a monster when all I did was accept help during my divorce. This is so cruel." I played that one twice. I didn't even know that's where it came from. Emily didn't know. According to her, my father had handed her $8,500, and she just accepted it without asking where it came from or whether it was appropriate to spend that much on a party. I didn't believe her. The next morning, my phone had 63 notifications. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails, emails. The family group chat I'd been muted in for years had exploded. I scrolled through it. My mother had sent a message to everyone. She's clearly been holding onto resentment for years. We had no idea she felt this way. We've always tried to be fair, but Sarah has always been so self-sufficient. We thought we were respecting her independence. If she needed help, she should have asked. Several relatives replied with supportive messages. "Your girls are lucky to have you. Don't let this drama ruin your family." But there were other messages too. My uncle Marco wrote, "I've been watching this dynamic for years and Sarah's not wrong. The favoritism has been pretty obvious." My cousin Rachel wrote, "I remember when Emily got a brand new car and Sarah took the bus to her own college graduation. That always felt weird to me." Aunt Linda wrote, "I love you both, but we all know Emily has gotten more support. Maybe it's time to acknowledge that instead of pretending it didn't happen." The family was splitting. Some defended my parents, some quietly agreed with me, some just wanted it to go away. And then my grandmother called. I answered. I'd always answered for my grandmother. She didn't say hello. She said, "Did your father really take your wedding money and give it to your sister?" "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm writing you a check for $10,000. You'll have it tomorrow. Use it for your venue." "Grandma, you don't have to do that," I said. "I know I don't have to," she said. "But your grandfather and I saved for 50 years so our family would be taken care of. I'm not letting you lose your wedding venue because your father made a stupid choice. Consider it an early inheritance." She hung up before I could argue. 10 minutes later, my father called. I answered this time. He didn't wait for me to speak. He said, "Your grandmother just called me. She's furious. She told me I'm a disgrace and that I've failed you as a father. Are you happy now, Sarah? You've turned my own mother against me." I said, "You turned her against you when you stole my wedding deposit." "I didn't steal anything," he snapped. "I made a decision about how to allocate resources within my own family. You're not entitled to my money." "It wasn't your money," I said. "It was mine. I gave it to you to hold, not to redistribute." "You're being selfish," he said. "Your sister was in crisis." "Emily is always in crisis," I said, "and you always fix it. That's the problem." He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "If you don't retract that email and apologize to your mother and sister, you're not welcome at family events anymore." I said, "I'll save you the trouble of uninviting me. I'm done." I hung up. Daniel was watching me from across the room. He said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Lighter." The venue coordinator called that afternoon. She said management approved an extension. "You have until Monday to submit the deposit." I explained your situation to them and they want to work with you. I thanked her, told her I'd have the money by Monday. My grandmother's check arrived Saturday morning, $10,000. The memo line said for a marriage built on real love. I deposited it immediately, paid the venue, sent the coordinator confirmation. Our wedding date was secured. Then I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "This is Emily. I'm using a friend's phone because I know you blocked me. We need to talk." I didn't respond. Another text, "I'm serious, Sarah. You don't understand what you've done." I was about to block the number when a third text came through. "Dad didn't just give me your money. There's more you don't know." I stared at that message. Then I typed, "What are you talking about?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, a message, "Can we meet in person? I'll tell you everything, but not over text." I showed Daniel. He said it's probably a trap. She wants to guilt you into backing down. "Maybe," I said, "but what if it's not?" We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our places. Neutral territory. Public. I told Daniel where I'd be and that if I wasn't back in an hour to call me. Emily was already there when I arrived. She looked different. Smaller somehow. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup. She was wearing sweatpants and an old hoodie. I sat down across from her. Said, "You have 30 minutes. She didn't waste time. She said the party cost $12,000, not $8,500. I waited. She said Dad told me he had $10,000 set aside for me to help me start over after the divorce. He said it was from their savings. I planned the party based on that number. I didn't know it was your money until you sent that email. When I confronted him, he admitted he took your $8,500 and added $4,000 of his own to make sure I had enough." "So he lied to both of us," I said. She nodded, but that's not the worst part. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What's the worst part?" She took a breath. "Mom knew. She knew he took your deposit. She tried to talk him out of it. They had a whole fight about it. I heard them. But he told her you'd figure something out and that I needed the support more. Mom agreed eventually. She said you'd always been resilient." My mother knew. My mother had watched my father take my wedding deposit, had argued against it, and then had agreed that sacrificing my wedding for Emily's party was acceptable because I was resilient. Emily was still talking. She said, "And there's something else. The money they spent on my wedding. Dad took out a loan. They're still paying it off. That's why they couldn't help you with yours. They're buried in debt from mine." "How much?" I asked. $20,000 still owed, she said. Maybe more. "So they went into debt for your wedding, then took my deposit for your divorce party, while still in debt from the first event." Emily looked at the table. "I didn't know about any of this until you sent that email. I've been going through their financial papers since Thursday. Sarah, they've been hiding a lot. From me, from you, from everyone." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you were right," she said quietly, "about all of it. I've been the favorite. I've gotten everything handed to me while you got nothing. And I let it happen because it was easier than questioning it." She looked up. Her eyes were red. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just telling you that you were right to send that email, because I needed to see it too." We sat there in silence. Then she said, "Are you really not coming to family events anymore?" I said, "I don't know. Are you going to keep letting them fund your chaos?" She flinched. Then she said, "I'm moving out. I got a job, a real one. I start Monday. I'm getting an apartment with a friend. I'm done living off them." I didn't know if I believed her, but I also didn't know if it mattered. She stood up, said, "I'm sorry for all of it." Then she left. I sat there for another 10 minutes, processing what I just learned. My mother had known. My parents were in debt. Emily was maybe, possibly, finally taking responsibility. When I got home, Daniel asked how it went. I told him everything. He said, "So what now?" I said, "Now we get married. And after that, I decide whether they get to be part of our lives." 2 weeks later, the invitations went out. My parents were not on the list. Emily was. I didn't know if she'd come, but I gave her the option. My father called when he didn't receive an invitation. He said you're really going to exclude your own parents from your wedding. I said you excluded yourselves when you chose Emily's party over my marriage. He hung up. My mother tried a different approach. She showed up at my apartment unannounced. Daniel answered the door. He said Sarah's not available. My mother said I'm her mother. I have a right to see her. Daniel said actually, you don't. He closed the door. I watched from the window as she stood there for a minute, then walked back to her car. The wedding was 3 weeks away. The venue was paid for. The dress was fitted. The flowers were ordered. Everything was falling into place. And my parents were about to realize that being excluded from their daughter's wedding wasn't a threat I'd made to manipulate them. It was a consequence they'd earned. The week before the wedding, my father sent a letter. Not an email, a physical letter delivered to my apartment. I opened it at the kitchen table while Daniel made coffee. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten. My father's careful block letters filling both sides of the paper. It started with Sarah. I've had time to think about everything that's happened. He wrote that he understood I was hurt, that he could see now how his decisions had created an imbalance, that he'd always believed he was helping both his daughters in the ways they needed, but he could acknowledge that the outcome hadn't been equal. He wrote that my mother was devastated at the idea of missing my wedding, that they both wanted to be there, that family should be able to forgive and move forward. Then, in the final paragraph, he wrote this: I'm asking you to let us come to your wedding, not because we deserve it, but because I don't want you to regret excluding us when you look back on this day. I'm sorry for taking your deposit. I'll pay you back. I'll make this right. Just please don't shut us out completely. I read it twice, then I handed it to Daniel. He read it in silence. Then he said, what do you want to do? I said I want to know if he means it, or if he just wants to avoid looking bad in front of the family. How do you find that out? Daniel asked. I said we test it. I wrote back, not a letter, an email, short and direct. I wrote, if you want to come to the wedding, here are my conditions. 1, you pay back the $8,500 before the ceremony. 2, you write a formal apology to me and to Daniel acknowledging what you did and why it was wrong. 3, you do not make any speeches or draw attention to yourselves at the wedding. You come as guests, not as parents of the bride in any ceremonial capacity. 4, you attend financial counseling to address the debt you've hidden from the family. And 5, you acknowledge in writing that Emily has received $142,000 more in financial support than I have, and you commit to not providing her any additional funds for the next 5 years. I sent it. 2 hours later, my father responded. 1 word. Unacceptable. I replied, then you're not invited. He wrote back, you're making a mistake. You're going to regret this. I didn't respond. My mother sent her own email an hour later. She wrote that my conditions were cruel and designed to humiliate them, that she'd tried to be understanding, but I was clearly determined to punish them, that she hoped I'd find peace someday, but she couldn't support this behavior. I deleted it. Emily sent a text. I heard about the conditions. For what it's worth, I think they're fair, but they're never going to agree to all of that. I wrote back, I know. The wedding was on a Saturday in early October. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, cool breeze, leaves just starting to turn. I got ready in the bridal suite with my bridesmaids, my cousin Rachel, my best friend Morgan, and 2 friends from college. Emily had been invited but declined. She sent a card that arrived the day before with $200 inside and a note that said, I'm not ready to be there yet, but I'm working on becoming someone who could be. Congratulations. I gave the $200 to the caterer as an extra tip. My grandmother arrived an hour before the ceremony. She was 86 years old and walked with a cane, but she'd insisted on being there early to help me get ready. She sat in the corner of the suite and watched me put on my dress. When I was fully dressed, she said, come here. I walked over. She reached up and adjusted my veil. Then she said, your grandfather would be so proud of you, not for the wedding, for standing up for yourself. I asked her if she thought I was wrong to exclude my parents. She said, I think your parents made choices that had consequences. You didn't create those consequences. You just stopped pretending they didn't exist. The ceremony started at 4. Daniel's family filled the groom's side. My side was smaller. Extended family, friends, my grandmother in the front row. There were 2 empty seats in the first row on my side. I'd left them empty intentionally. When it came time to walk down the aisle, my Uncle Marco offered to walk with me. I'd asked him the week before. He wasn't my father, but he'd been at every birthday, every graduation, every milestone my parents had missed or minimized. He said it would be an honor. Halfway down the aisle, I looked at those 2 empty seats, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, just clarity. The ceremony was short. We'd written our own vows. Daniel promised to see me, to value my independence without taking it for granted, to build a partnership where both people mattered equally. I promised to let myself be supported, to trust that I didn't have to earn love by being low maintenance, to build a life where asking for help wasn't a weakness. We were pronounced married at 4:32. The reception was everything I'd wanted. Good food, better music, people who actually cared about us. My grandmother danced with Uncle Marco. My friends gave toasts that were funny and heartfelt. Daniel's father welcomed me into their family with a speech that made me cry. No one mentioned my parents' absence. It wasn't a gap that needed to be explained. It was just the reality. At 8:15, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed this family. I showed it to Daniel. He said, do you want me to block her number for you? I said no. I want to remember exactly how they responded when faced with consequences. I screenshotted the message, saved it, then put my phone away and went back to dancing. The next morning, Daniel and I left for our honeymoon, 2 weeks in Ireland. We'd paid for it ourselves. Every meal, every hotel, every train ticket, it was ours. We were in Dublin when my Aunt Linda called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She said, I thought you should know. Your parents are telling people you uninvited them out of spite, that they tried to reconcile and you refused. They're playing the victim. I said, let them. Are you sure? Linda asked. People are believing them. I said the people who believe them, without asking my side, aren't people I need in my life. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. When we got back from our honeymoon, there was a package waiting at our apartment. No return address. Inside was a check for $8,500. A note in my father's handwriting said, here's your deposit back. We're even now. We're even now. As if repaying stolen money erased the theft. As if one check balanced 28 years of inequity. I didn't cash it. I took a photo of it, deposited it mobile, and donated the entire amount to a nonprofit that helped women rebuild financial independence after divorce. The irony felt appropriate. 3 months after the wedding, Emily called. She said I kept my promise. I've been working. I have my own apartment. I'm paying my own bills. I haven't asked them for money once. I said, I'm proud of you. She said, I know, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm trying to be different. I said, call me in a year. If you're still independent, we'll talk. She said, okay. 6 months after the wedding, my mother sent a Facebook friend request. I declined it. A year after the wedding, my father sent an email. The subject line was, can we talk? I didn't open it. A year and a half after the wedding, I got pregnant. Daniel and I had been trying for a few months. When the test came back positive, the first thing I felt was joy. The second thing I felt was relief that my parents wouldn't be part of this either. My grandmother was the first person we told. She cried happy tears and said I get to be a great grandmother. Then she said, are you going to tell your parents? I said no. She didn't argue. Emily found out through the family grapevine. She sent a text. Congratulations, I'm still working, still independent, still trying. I replied, thank you, keep going. 2 years after the wedding, my daughter was born. We named her Claire. She had Daniel's eyes and my stubborn chin. When I held her in the hospital, I made a promise. I promised her she would never be the backup daughter. She would never be told she was strong enough to handle less. She would never watch her needs get sacrificed for someone else's wants and be expected to call it fairness. My grandmother visited us in the hospital. She held Claire and said she looks like you did, determined from day one. I asked her if she thought I should reach out to my parents now that I had a daughter, if Claire deserved to know her grandparents. She said Claire deserves grandparents who treat her mother with respect. If your parents wanted to be in her life, they should have treated you better. 3 months after Claire was born, Emily came to visit. She brought a gift, a handmade baby blanket she'd crocheted herself. She said, "I've been sober for 18 months. I'm in therapy. I got a promotion at work. I'm not the person I was." I said, "I can see that." She asked if she could hold Claire. I said yes. She sat on the couch with my daughter in her arms and said, "I'm sorry I let them treat you that way. I'm sorry I benefited from it and didn't question it." I said, "I know." She said, "Do you think we can be sisters again? Real sisters?" I said, "We're not there yet, but we're closer than we were." She nodded, said that's fair. When she left, Daniel said, "Do you trust her?" I said, "I trust that she's trying. That's enough for now." My parents still don't know they have a granddaughter. They might find out through family eventually. They might reach out. They might demand access. And when they do, I'll tell them the same thing I told them before the wedding. Relationships are built on respect, and you can't demand access to someone's life after spending years proving their needs don't matter to you. That email I sent 2 years ago wasn't about revenge. It was about making visible what everyone had agreed to ignore. The favoritism, the imbalance, the decades of being told I was capable when what they really meant was disposable. My father thought I would absorb the loss of my wedding deposit the way I'd absorbed everything else. Quietly, independently, without complaint. What he didn't understand was that independence wasn't a personality trait I was born with. It was a skill I'd learned because no one was coming to help me. And once you learn that skill, you stop waiting for people to choose you. You choose yourself. If you're watching this and you recognize pieces of your own story and mine, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not imagining it. You are not being dramatic. You are not asking for too much. When one person in a family consistently receives more support, more grace, more chances, and the other person is told their strength is why they get less, that's not a compliment. That's neglect dressed up in positive language. Being called independent isn't always praise. Sometimes it's just the word people use when they don't want to admit they're giving you less. And being told you're resilient doesn't mean you have to keep absorbing damage to prove it. My father thought that wedding deposit was his to redistribute because he'd stopped seeing me as someone with needs that mattered. I'd been competent for so long that he'd redefined competence as not deserving investment. Every time I succeeded without help, it justified helping me less the next time. I'd built my own trap by being good at surviving it. Breaking out of that pattern required me to do something that felt selfish at the time. I had to make the invisible visible. I had to force my family to see what they'd been benefiting from ignoring. And I had to accept that some people would rather blame me for pointing out the imbalance than admit the imbalance existed. That email didn't fix my family. My parents still believe they were justified. They still think I overreacted. They still tell relatives that I'm bitter and unforgiving. And maybe I am unforgiving, but forgiveness without accountability is just permission to repeat the harm. I don't know if my parents will ever meet my daughter. I don't know if Emily and I will rebuild something real, or if we're just two people being polite in the wreckage. I don't know if my extended family will stop trying to mediate a reconciliation I never asked for. What I do know is this: I have a marriage built on actual partnership. I have a daughter who will grow up knowing her needs matter as much as anyone else's. I have a life I built without waiting for permission or approval from people who proved they weren't capable of giving it fairly. And I have a wedding album full of people who showed up because they valued me, not because they were obligated to tolerate me. My father bought my sister a divorce party with my wedding deposit because he believed I would handle the loss better than she would handle not getting what she wanted. He was right about one thing. I did handle it. Just not the way he expected. If someone in your life keeps sacrificing your milestones for someone else's convenience, you don't owe them another chance to do it again. You don't owe them your wedding, your peace, or your future just because they're family. You owe yourself the life you've been building in the gaps they left. So if you're standing at your own version of that phone call, hearing someone explain why your needs matter less, I hope you remember this. Their justification doesn't make it fair. Their expectation that you'll absorb it doesn't make it right. And your decision to stop accepting it doesn't make you the villain. It makes you free. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about people who stopped waiting for fairness and started building it themselves, subscribe. Because there are a lot more where this came from.